Cities are kind of like people. Some are big, some are small, some are quiet and reserved, and others are loud and boisterous. Cities, just like people, even have moods to them. I'm sure we've all been to a new city before and it just has that cold, unwelcoming vibe. Whereas others are full of life, good vibes, and soulful. But when it comes to cities with or without soul, what does that actually mean? Well, for me it means they feel alive, authentic, and deeply connected to its people and history. Cities where there's lots of people walking around, sitting out on the street eating and drinking. Some examples that spring to mind are Lisbon of Portugal, Naples in Italy, New Orleans in the US, or even Hoi An in Vietnam. But that's not the focus of today's video. We are in fact looking at the opposite. Cities with no soul whatsoever, the ones that feel lifeless and or cultureless. This, however, doesn't make these cities particularly bad cities or bad places to live, but they just lack the soul that the cities just mentioned have. So let's travel around the world and investigate some of the most soulless cities on the planet. So let's start off with perhaps the city most associated with being soulless. It's one of the most impressive and wealthiest cities on Earth, but as it was all pretty much built within the last couple of decades, it really lacks that history and culture. It's also a very car-centric place that during the summer is unbearably hot. Yes, I'm talking about no other than Dubai. As just mentioned, the city is pretty much brand new. It's all planned and kind of unnatural. Compare this to a city like, say, Istanbul, where you can see layers of history, culture, and architecture from different eras when walking down the street. Speaking of walking, Dubai really isn't a walkable place. Yes, of course, you can walk around the CBD, but getting around the city pretty much requires a car. It's a huge urban sprawl. And again, as mentioned earlier, the weather, especially in the summer, is beyond unbearable, so most people don't want to walk around anyway. They'd prefer to drive around in their nicely air-conditioned G-Wagons. The city prioritizes luxury tourism and shopping over traditional or everyday experiences. And for many of the people working there, this extravagant lifestyle is completely at odds with their own reality. The majority of people who live in Dubai are expats, usually from poorer regions like South Asia. They are purely there to earn some decent wages to send back home to their families. They didn't move there for the culture or high living standards, but purely for the money, for the usually physically demanding jobs. Now, as cool as the man-made islands and artificial attractions that Dubai has to offer, they again feel unnatural, touristy, and in some ways tacky. The disastrous and unimaginable environmental damage from projects such as the Palm were all just so that mega wealthy people could live on something that looks cool from above. High living standards and very safe, yes, but full of soul and character, definitely not. It's fair to say that China is a country full of history, interesting architecture, and a very impressive array of different styles of places. Ranging from ancient walled cities to ultra-modern skylines to the relatively new copy-paste suburbs, as what can be seen in many places across the country. One example of this is Huaxi village, a village found some 150 kilometers northwest of Shanghai. At first glance, you might think that this village is built for China's elite and wealthiest. However, this isn't the case. The village was built by the state to promote and show off China's rural modernization and wealth. But in reality, it functions more like a political showpiece than a real community. The houses there were never for sale to the general public. They were actually given to government officials and local residents. With one major caveat: you never own the property. If you leave, you lose it. The town was once given the name of China's richest village, which at first glance to the naked eye, it kind of looks really nice, but when you zoom out and find out the real story, you realise it's all but an empty shell of a town. Its luxurious identical villas, empty streets and strict ownership system is all in place mainly to impress investors and visitors, rather than to serve normal residents. and after all the village's businesses declined, the place became even more of a soulless ghost town. Today it's widely seen as one of China's most soulless, copy-paste, fake prosperity developments. The opposite of the vibrant, historic cities China is actually known for. Alright, let's now move on to a city a little closer to home for me, the UK's most well-known planned city, Milton Keynes. So most British towns and cities look like this. However, Milton Keynes looks nothing like this and more like a town you'd find in an American corporate park or town. But why exactly does it look like this? What's the story behind it? Well, that's because the town was planned from scratch in the 1960s as a new town to ease London's overcrowding. It was designed for cars with its wide roads, grid layouts, and modern uniform buildings. There was no historic town to grow organically. The city is known as a commuter town. Basically, people live here but commute into London daily, as it's only around 40 minutes on the train. This definitely adds to the soulless vibe, as many people during the week will be in London and only returning for the evenings and weekends. Now remember, being soulless doesn't necessarily make a place bad to live in. In fact, living standards are rather high in Milton Keynes. And its close proximity to London obviously gives it many financial benefits. Everything being newish also has advantages, as there's lots of green spaces, so it's not a bad place to live. But it definitely lacks the soul that other cities such as York, Bath and Edinburgh have. Alright, this next one is a bit of a toss-up. I can't decide whether this place is completely soulless or in fact the complete opposite, full of soul and character. So I'll give some points and then I want you to let me know in the comments what you think. So this city is extremely touristy. The entire city revolves around profit and entertainment, and many of the people there are simply there to work temporarily. Some places are luxurious and some extremely tacky, but it's world famous and incredibly unique. The city in question is no other than Las Vegas. The city definitely serves a purpose. It's basically the adult version of Disneyland, somewhere where you're guaranteed to have fun but is very expensive. Over-the-top commercial signage and neon lights everywhere, fake landmarks and car-focused roads makes the place feel tacky and over-commercialized. But at the same time, it's so extreme and unlike anywhere else on Earth, maybe that's what gives it its soul. The streets are busy, people are everywhere having a good time, and there are many crazy street performers, so in some regards it does have lots of soul. It's not somewhere I'm personally rushing to visit, but I do see the appeal, especially if you love a flutter at the casino. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let's now move on to a city that I've kind of been to, Male, the capital city of the Maldives. So when you imagine the Maldives, you probably imagine scenes like this, some of the most incredible tropical islands on Earth, white sand and the clearest waters on the planet. I'm gonna assume that pretty much no one on Earth has ever been to the Maldives purely to go to its capital, Male. It's one of the most unique looking cities on Earth. It's a city where every square inch available is being used. Now, the only reason why I or any other tourist would ever go here is because it's where the country's main airport is. You basically fly into the airport and then leave immediately via a boat to a nearby tropical island. The city is extremely overcrowded with little green space. The buildings aren't aesthetically pleasing either. Most are made from concrete blocks for housing and administration, lacking charm or historical identity. The real culture and daily life of the people of the Maldives can be seen across their many local islands, as opposed to the main capital city, which is just more about logistics, business and government. So in the intro I mentioned a place called Hoi An. It's a city found in Vietnam that is very appealable to tourists. It's arguably the country's most soulful place. You can clearly see centuries of history reflected in its architecture. And of course the lanterns that fill the river at night. It's very walkable, small and friendly. Let's compare that to another city found within Vietnam, Da Nang, pretty much a digital nomad city. Unlike Hoi An, which is full of old buildings and charm, Da Nang is full of bougie high-rise apartment blocks, nicely paved new roads, and Western amenities, which again is absolutely fine and provides nice living standards, but it's built primarily for expats. Not for locals, which means it lacks character and authenticity. You could literally be anywhere in the world, it doesn't have that chaotic genuineness of true Vietnam. Alright, let's now get out of Asia and fly all the way across the Pacific into South America, into the capital city of Brazil, Brasilia. Now again, similar to Milton Keynes or Da Nang, this isn't a bad place to live, and in fact probably one of the cities with the highest living standards on the continent. However, what it certainly does lack is the vibes, energy and culture that Brazil is famous for. When I think of Brazil, I think of people playing football in the streets, blasting music, and carnivals. Loud, energetic, and chaotic, but in a good way. However, as Brasilia is a purposely built capital city, it lacks all of the above. The city was built in the 1960s as a purpose-built capital city. Its location inland helped to draw power away from its main cities like Rio and Sao Paulo. But in doing so it means it lacks any beaches, something that Brazilians really like. The city itself actually looks really nice, it's modern, well planned and full of interesting buildings. But again it lacks character. If you asked a random person in the street to name which city this is, I guarantee most people would never be able to guess it. And this certainly would be shocked when I told them that it was found in Brazil. Brasilia really reminds me of another capital, a capital which was also built from scratch to be a capital, a place found inland and built to draw power away from its other main cities. This city is actually one of the best in the world for living standards, it's very green and generally a very nice place to live, but according to many sources, very boring. Any ideas which city I'm referring to? It is no other than Canberra, the capital city of Australia. I'm not sure about you, but when I think of Australia, I think of the raw wilderness, the beaches and surfing. But Canberra doesn't have any of that really. And again, similar to other places mentioned, it was a city that was planned, so everything feels unorganic and deliberate. Again, this isn't a bad thing and in fact usually a good thing, but it does give that soulless vibe. With it being the capital city, much of the city is designed for embassies and institutions, not spontaneous community activities. So this is Kazakhstan, a country with some of the most incredible natural geography on Earth. Now, from a country like this, I wouldn't expect its capital to look like this, a city filled with weird futuristic architecture and wide boulevards. It's home to many interesting and odd monuments and buildings that kind of just don't fit in with the vibe of Kazakhstan. The streets are built primarily for cars, there's nothing really going on there, it kind of looks like a ghost town, the complete opposite of what you might see in, say, Florence in Italy. In the 1990s, Astana was rebuilt to be the country's new capital. They wanted to have this futuristic, impressive looking city. But in my opinion, it just kind of looks awkward and soulless. Again, not bad, but just lacks character. Next up is perhaps the most soulless city on Earth, a city often described as being the most depressing on the planet. Not exactly a great title. The city in question is Norilsk in Russia, specifically in its central north within the Arctic Circle. There are many reasons why this place lacks soul, mainly due to it being an industrial city with its skyline being dominated by factories and Soviet-era apartment blocks. Add this to the extreme Arctic climate, permafrost and pollution, and it makes outdoor life bleak and uninviting. And although it's not brand spanking new, the entire place has been built within the last 100 years, meaning there are no real signs of historic architecture or cultural traditions. Add to the fact that the city's isolation and that most people are there to work in mining or smelting, and overall you have one of the most soulless cities on the planet. You couldn't pay me any amount of money to work or live there. Next up is a city which couldn't look any more different to that of our previous entry, Songdo of South Korea. So this city is pretty much brand spanking new. Construction started in 2003 and it's still in development right now. It's described as a futuristic, technology-driven smart city, which again is a nice place to work and live, but it's absolutely soulless. As someone who absolutely loves tech, I would love to visit a city like this, but again, living there, you would get kind of bored. The city is perfectly planned, full of tech, skyscrapers, and wide brand new streets. But there's one problem: there is very little street life or markets. Everything just feels like futuristic, modern corporate life. Very different to the packed, trendy streets of Seoul. Let's now show a little love for Africa. Well, maybe hate, as we're talking about soulless places. When I think of cities across Africa, I imagine loud places full of people, street vendors, and honking horns. Chaotic, yes, but full of soul and energy. But down in southeastern Africa is where we'll find Dodoma, the capital city of Tanzania. The city was built in the 1970s as the government wanted to move inland and away from Dar es Salaam. Therefore, a lot of the city has planned, wide administrative zones, not organically evolved streets. There's no historic buildings, bustling markets, or any of the craziness that can be found in, say, Lagos, Nairobi, or even across the Zanzibar Channel into the winding streets of Stone Town in Zanzibar. It's essentially a city for government workers, so there's not a lot going on there. Infrastructure is limited, the economy is governmental based, and there is little to no street life. Staying on the topic of Africa, let's travel up north to a country that has lots of soul and history, and was once home to the greatest civilization the planet had ever seen: Egypt. So Egypt has many incredible cities and places to visit. Cairo is obviously home to the pyramids, and then you have Alexandria, one of the most important cities of the ancient world. But then you have the likes of Sharm El-Sheikh, a city centered pretty much around big hotels, resorts, and tourist infrastructure. It's not soulless in terms of abandonment, and it's pretty lively and there's lots to do. But in comparison to what the rest of the country has to offer, it feels very fake, artificial, and purpose-built. However, there is a reason why some 4 million people visited the city in 2024. It's got nice beaches, weather, diving, and all the fun that comes with resorts, but in terms of culture, mesmerizing places that really encapsulate the country's history, well, Sharm El-Sheikh doesn't offer that. Next up is a place where I've been, twice actually, Manila, the capital city of the Philippines. Now, the Philippines is potentially my favourite country in the world. The people are unbelievably friendly and speak amazing English, and the country itself is incredibly beautiful. However, in my opinion, the same can't be said about its capital. Similar to the Maldives, most people visit the country to see its gorgeous tropical islands, but its capital is nothing of the sort. It's one of the most densely populated cities on Earth, some 14 million people live there. Now, both times that I've been is simply because it houses the country's biggest airport, so again, like the Maldives, you fly in and then leave immediately. I've never heard of anyone going to the Philippines to primarily visit its capital. Both times that I was there, I struggled to find anything to do. It was very unwalkable, busy, and extremely hot. Also, maybe I was still in the wrong place, but I was offered many, let's say, illegal services and products whilst walking around the streets. The city is dominated by tall skyscrapers surrounded by informal settlements, making large areas feel disconnected from everyday life. As you can tell, certainly not my favourite city, however I can't stress enough about how amazing the rest of the country is. Now, this video could go on forever. I could easily name a dozen or so more places, but I think we'll leave it here. Like and subscribe for part 2, and as always, thank you so much for watching.